from 60 Living, and welcome to day -4 as we prepare to start your modified fasting program. So this is the second day of the 5 days of prep before your program starts, and the topics we want to cover today are going to be your water intake and some dietary terms around this way of eating, and then we're going to get to the recipes you're going to make for your protocol. So for the water, the optimal intake for an average person with an average activity level is about 2 to 3 liters of water every day. But during this program, you're going to stop digesting for long periods of time, and your body's going to have the chance to remove toxins from your blood and your muscles and your tissues that normally it doesn't get to. So it's extra important to have plenty of water, and even some more than the recommended amount, so that you can flush all those toxins out and they don't just linger around. In addition to the healing that you're going to be doing with all the toxins being removed, hydration also helps with digestion. Now your body, each cell requires a level of water to do its proper functioning. And when you don't have enough, one of the first things that your body withholds water from is your colon. And so that slows or even stops your digestion if you're dehydrated. And so food and waste doesn't pass through you. So it's important that we maintain at least your 3 liters of water per day, and we would recommend that you can even shoot up to 5 liters per day, particularly on the water only fasting days. If you're not sure how much water you're drinking right now, just go ahead and start measuring it today. So you can fill up 1 liter bottle or something like that, and just keep refilling it and keep track of how many that you're drinking. If you're nowhere near the mark yet, we suggest that you start increasing your water intake every day by about 1 to 2 cups, so that when you start your modified fasting program on day 1, your body is already a little bit accustomed to drinking at least 3 liters of water per day. Now, as you increase your water, your need to urinate is going to increase as well, and your body just isn't used to all of the water yet, so that will normalize over time. And it may not normalize before your program starts, but it will normalize, so stick with it. And we don't recommend that you chug the water. It would be best to take sips throughout the day, but get it in however you can initially, just to start feeling what it feels like to be fully hydrated. Now we'll get into some dietary terminology. If you're not already on a whole food diet, we just want to cover what that looks like right now. So as you prepare to go into this program, which will be a whole food, whole plant diet, you can start getting used to it as far as your taste buds and your body are concerned. So tomorrow, that's day -3 of the program, you're going to be on a 60% whole food or whole plant diet. Now that is not the same as vegan or plant-based. So both of those ways of eating are great. They're great for the environment and they're great for the animals. And they're pretty good for health, but the optimal way the human body is designed to work is through a whole plant diet. Now the difference is that both vegan and plant-based diets, yes, they don't have any animal products in them, but there can be some processed foods like vegan junk food. So these are your burgers and deep fried fries, anything with salt, oil, and sugar, and anything that's not in its whole form. Now whole food or whole plant diet is a natural food that grows on a tree or out of the ground or on a bush that you wash and either peel or chop or steam or boil, but you're not taking anything away from it and you're not adding any refined substances to it. So here are a few examples. At home, you might make a really delicious fruit and vegetable juice. So you can put pounds and pounds of fruits and vegetables into a juicer and come out with a single glass of juice, and you consume an incredibly rich, concentrated amount of micronutrients all in one sitting. But that's not a whole food. You've taken all the fiber out of those fruits and vegetables. So it is very healthy still, but you're missing all that fiber, and so you're not getting the complete balanced nutrition that nature provides. So those are one of the differences. Oats is another really good example. So we're not always used to seeing oat groats, which are oats in their whole form. So the oat groat looks a whole lot like a grain of rice. And here's a picture of side by side, there's a grain of brown rice on the left-hand side. These are both dried. And on the right-hand side is a whole oat groat. Now it's been taken out of the inedible husk that it grows in, but otherwise this is its natural form. The more commonly seen varieties of oats you might have seen are steel cut, rolled, which are the same as old-fashioned, or quick cooking oats. Now steel cut means that the whole oat groat has been chopped into a few pieces by a steel blade, and that's all that's been done to it. Now it's still very close to the whole food, but because it's been broken into pieces, think of it like it maybe is partially chewed. So your body doesn't have to work so hard to get the starch out of it. So glucose enters your blood a little bit quicker than if you had eaten the entire oat groat. Next down on the list of refinement for oats is the old-fashioned or rolled oats. Now this is a whole oat groat that's been steamed and rolled flat. And it's still the whole groat, but now it's been lightly cooked and the surface area is larger. So again, the glucose is absorbed even quicker than the steel cut oat pieces once they're cooked. And finally, the quick cooking oats are processed a whole lot like the old-fashioned oats, but they're pressed even thinner, and so they're even easier to cook, even easier to digest, and you'll see a pretty good spike in your blood sugar when you consume the quick cooking oats, which is the most refined version of the oat out of the four. Now I want to touch on toxins just a little bit here too, because even if we're eating a very clean diet, so if we're eating a whole plant, whole food diet, like we just talked about, we're still taking on toxins from other areas. So there are toxins in the air and in your really clean city water, and there's toxins when you go to the gas station and breathe in the fumes, and when you put on makeup or other skincare products, whatever you put in your hair, your skin can absorb toxins as well. So there's toxins in our environment, in the home, and of course outside as well. There's toxins on the fresh produce that you buy at the supermarket. Another form of toxin that we don't always think about is cortisol. So when you're stressed out, your body produces excess cortisol. That's a hormone that's used to tell your body to be on high alert. And when your body is on high alert, non-vital processes are shut down so that you can give your full undivided attention to the high alert that you're dealing with. And these non-vital systems are your digestive and reproductive systems and your immune system. And so in addition to that, the excess cortisol hormone needs to be processed as a toxin and removed as waste. And we take on these toxins all day long. So they hurt our system. They take away from the healing power that we're doing while fasting, because these just tack on to the list of things that your body has to do while it's not digesting and it's trying to heal. So in order to minimize the toxins in the body, this program is designed to be a whole plant protocol. And the more you feed your body this way, the more it's going to get used to it and just really enjoy the feeling and nourishment of the whole plant diet. Now on to the recipes. So what you're going to see in this video is the recipe from the original microbiome protocol. And so the recipes that you get for your particular program might be a little bit different based on what your program's focus is, or if there's been substitutions for seasonal ingredients or something like that. But the methods are going to be the same. So I want to remind you to give yourself plenty of time and make a plan to go shopping and also to make these recipes. So there's a lot of preparation involved, but the payoff is you're going to be creating your food for 5 full days. So you won't have to do any cooking at all during those 5 days. In the kitchen, you're going to be preparing your cold raw salads and you're going to be reheating some of this food, but otherwise there's no cooking for the next 5 days. So this is going to be some work to do, and you're going to prepare these recipes twice throughout the protocol. So when you're looking at your shopping list, it's for the first 5 days, and that means 4 of those days are feeding days, and 1 full day you won't eat at all. That'll be a water fast. And then you'll go into your second half of the program, which again will be 4 days of feeding and 1 day of water fast. So the recipe that we're going to show today is 1/2 of the full program. This is going to be 5 days worth of food. If you want to make all of these recipes in 1 day, I would recommend that you really look through the recipes and read the methods, because if you have something that's going to take longer, that might be good to start with that and just spend less time overall cooking throughout the day. So for the recipes I'm making today from the original microbiome recipe, there are some beans and there are some grains I'm going to want to cook. So I'm going to start with the beans. I'm going to cover those with water and I'm going to soak them for about 4 hours. And then you'll notice that probably meal 1, maybe even meal 2 has some grains in it. So I'm going to start soaking these for about 6 hours so that I can get that out of the way, and I'll be ready to start the program on time. So first I'm going to make the cleanse broth, and this is where I recommend that you start as well. So what you can do is chop everything into bite-sized pieces, and then you can throw everything into a stock pot, cover it with water, and make sure you're adding at least 4 liters of water, and probably a little bit more because some will evaporate in the cooking process. And you just want to withhold the spices. Don't put those in just yet. So you're going to want to bring that to a rapid boil and then reduce to a simmer, and you can do that for up to about 20 minutes, but just keep checking your vegetables, and when they're soft, the broth is ready to go. So at that point, when you decide that the vegetables are soft enough, just go ahead and turn off the heat, add the spices, and then just let it sit there and cool until you're able to drain the vegetables out, so you're just left with the broth. And then go ahead and put the broth into containers or however you want to store it, and you can put that right in the fridge and it's ready to go. Now during the program, you're going to be drinking 1 liter of broth every day during feeding days. So as mentioned, during that first 5 days, you have 4 feeding days and 1 fasting day. So you're going to need 4 liters of broth. And then in the second half of the program, it's the same thing. You'll need those 4 liters of broth again. So if you've cooked your broth recipe and when you finish it all up and you drain the vegetables out and you don't have quite 4 liters yet, just go ahead and add some filtered tap water to make 4 liters. You are going to need the full 4 liters. Next, I'm going to make the cleanse stew part 2, and that's because it's going to primarily be all of those vegetables that you just made with the broth. Everything that you just drained out, that becomes the base of your cleanse stew part 2. And then we just add in the rest of the ingredients, which is some lemon and some fresh herbs. And then you can choose to use an immersion blender and break this down so that it either is partially more creamy, or you can make the whole thing just a puree if you'd like. I prefer to leave it whole, so I'm not going to do any blending at all. So that's it for that particular recipe. And then next, I'm going to make the cleanse stew part 1. And just like with the broth, it's a 1-pot recipe. So what I'm going to do is cut everything up, and I'm going to water saute the onions for a few minutes to get a little bit of color on them, and that just enhances the flavor. And then next, you can add the beans and spices and vegetables, cover it with water, and cook it all up just like you did with the broth. But I like my vegetables to be like a little bit more firm still. So what I'm going to do is, since the beans take the longest to cook, I've got my sauteed onions in the pan. I'm going to add the beans. I'm going to cover it with plenty of water to cook, and I'm going to start checking it every 20 minutes. So I'll stir it and I'll check how tender the beans are. And I'm going to check, since there's 2 beans in my recipe, I'm going to check each bean and make sure that they're both cooked. Now when they're both almost soft, I'm going to go ahead and add in all of the vegetables and continue cooking. So that might be another 15 minutes or so. And then after that, you can add in the herbs, the kale, and the spices. I'm sorry, just the kale and the spices for this recipe. And stir it in, and then just leave it until it's a manageable temperature that you can put it into containers to store. And like I said earlier, I started soaking my grains. So just to get ready for the program, I like to make at least a couple days worth of grains. And you can pick one, or you can have a couple. You can make a whole variety together. You can even cook them together if they have similar cooking and soaking times. And so what I've done here is I cooked oat groats. I soaked them, and then I rinsed them several times, and I put them in my rice cooker, which my rice cooker has a porridge setting. And so once I started cooking it, it took about 75 minutes, and I just let it cool until I can handle it and put it into storage containers. Now the other things I keep in the fridge or around the house as I get started for day 1 is, in the refrigerator, I've got some fresh spinach because that's in my protocol to eat with meal 1. And I've got my bitter greens, fresh berries if they're available. Frozen are also a great option as well. I've got some lemons out on the counter, and I've got some apple cider vinegar. And I've got a bunch of spice blends that I really like to add that are salt, oil, and sugar free. and I just add them however I feel for that particular meal. Also, grind enough flax and chia seeds for the entire program. I do that all up front during these prep days. And so they're just ready to go, and I don't have to mess around with grinding anything during the protocol. So now we're going to cover what a typical eating day is going to look like on the modified fasting program. So you've got those 3 windows. You're either fasting for 16 hours, 18 hours, or 20 hours. And all 3 will begin and end the same. So at the beginning, you're going to have 500 milliliters of broth, and you want to add some lemon juice to that, and I choose to add my flax and chia in here. So I put about a tablespoon of fresh lemon juice, 1 tablespoon of ground flax seeds, and 1 tablespoon of ground chia seeds, and I just whisk that all together and drink it. Now, if you're still hungry right then, it would be a good time to eat your bitter green salad. So this is an example using collard greens and fresh berries and apple cider vinegar and some pumpkin seeds, some raw pumpkin seeds. And so everybody's doing those to break your fast. And then meal number 1 is also in all 3 styles of fasting, whether it's 16, 18, or 20 hours of fasting. So meal 1 is an extremely nutritious meal. It's going to be anti-inflammatory foods and just generally aid in digestion and all of the healing work that your body's going to want to do during the program. So it's important that you get this nutrition in if you can. You can choose to eat this all in one sitting, or you might choose to break this up into 2 or 3 or more meals if your stomach just can't handle that amount of food all at one time. Now, if you're on the 20 and 4 window, that's 20 hours of fasting and a 4-hour feeding window, you get the broth, the greens, and meal 1. And then you're going to get into, you're going to do the greens and broth at the end. But that's the meal 1 is your main source of food and calories for the day. Now, if you are on the 18 and 6 window, you could choose to have meal number 2 as well. And so whatever that is in your protocol, you could have that the next time you get hungry. And if you're in the 16-hour fasting and 8-hour feeding window, you can also have meal 3 after you finish meal 1 and meal 2. Now, everyone's going to end the same, and it's not the full bitter green salad that we have to break the fast. This one is just some raw bitter greens with a little bit of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice. And then finally you finish up with another 500 milliliters of broth. So after the first couple of days, you're going to get used to what it feels like to eat however many meals is in your particular protocol, and then how much time you need to give yourself to be able to consume that salad of up to a couple of cups of bitter greens and then the broth, because that's a filling meal to end your day with. So you might want to start that an hour before your feeding window closes, or if it doesn't bother you, maybe 30 minutes before your feeding window ends. And now just 2 final tips for the food preparation. So first is when you cook the broth the first time, there's so many vegetables in the in the cooking liquid that you drain off that might be enough for the entire program, the entire 10 days. So when you remake the broth the second time, you might have like a whole batch of cooked vegetables left over. Now these are going to be great transition foods that we can talk about later in your actual program, but these also freeze beautifully. So if you still have plenty of vegetables left over from the first time you make the recipes, days 1 through 5, then just go ahead and keep eating off of those, and you're welcome to freeze the second half. And you could freeze them with some grains already cooked into individual portions so that you have quick and easy, fast food meals in your freezer after the program is over. And the second tip is that when you make your, all your pre-made foods, they're going to be sitting in the refrigerator for 5+ days, depending on how early you make them. And if you put everything into one big container or a couple of big containers, every time you open the lid off of those containers, you're introducing fresh air, which promotes the food going bad a little bit quicker, so it'll spoil quicker. So I recommend that if you can, the more containers you can separate that in, the better. Just to wrap up this particular lesson, make sure that you account for all of the water you're drinking today to see if you're close to that 3-liter mark, and start increasing if you're not. And think about how you're going to prep all of your food, and begin your 60%, at least 60% whole food, whole plant diet today. And we'll see you in day -3.